so that we have time not just to cover this, but do some Q&A. So I'm excited about that as well.
All right, well, I'm going to kill the music. I'm going to stop the share here, and then I'm going to spotlight Tim and myself. So Tim, you are big and bold in everyone's face right now. Okay, and I'm here with you. Okay, I'll kick us off. Let's get started. We're going to try and spend, well, we normally spend 30 minutes every week in the weekly briefing. We're going to go longer than that today because we're going to leave some time for discussion, question and answer, and so forth. But just to get your bearings, in case you're new here, I'm Joel, Senior Partner at RevThink. This is my colleague, Tim Thompson, the founder, the Chief Revolution Thinker. Say hello, Tim.
Yeah, it's great to be with you today. I love this annual event. It's when we get to see names and faces that we don't usually get to keep in touch with throughout the entire year, and a few faces and names that I'm unfamiliar with. So welcome to you who haven't been here before. I don't know personally. Sorry if I haven't had a chance to reach out to you, but it's great to be part of this event today and hopefully some more in the future.
So what is the weekly briefing? It is a time when we, as a community of business owners that run studios, production companies, creative agencies, we get together once a week, and Tim and I lead the conversation on what's on everybody's minds. What's the news everyone's talking about? What's a trend that we're spotting in the industry that people need to know about? And it's a quick format. We spend about 30 minutes every week. So if this is of interest to you, we welcome you to come back for future editions of the weekly briefing. So be watching us on social or subscribe to our list. Today, we're gonna put some special time that we've dedicated to what we're calling our annual industry metrics report. And this is something we did last year, and we had a big turnout because, Tim, I think this is like that moment when everyone is kind of wondering, wait a minute, can I sort of see how my numbers compare to everybody else?
Yeah, I feel like, well, one thing I should say is, as a member of RevThink, and what we focus on primarily are you, the creative entrepreneur, and what it takes to run a thriving creative business. So RevThink exists in that capacity that you can thrive in your business, but also life and career are other elements that we want you to be focusing on and know are important to you. And a big element in making sure those things are successful is looking forward, knowing what's possible, but also getting out of your own echo chamber, your own headspace, and wondering what it's like and what everyone else is doing. So this one time a year, what we do at RevThink is we're doing annual reports with our clients, and those annual reports and large kind of assessments that we get to do on a global basis allow us to kind of look at the data from all of our engagements and all of these inputs and compare, look at companies, look at what's comparing from industry to industry or segment to segment, but also what's happened year over year. And I asked myself a question: do these business owners know what they're up against? Do they understand where things are going? Has the cheese moved on them? Or are they too critical of themselves and wondering, would it be easier? Do other people have it easy? So just to give people that once a year global perspective of where you are, how you compare to what the industry is doing as we see as a standard or as an average. And then hopefully give you some perspective of how you're doing, what areas you need to focus on, and tools that we have in place that would help you achieve that.
So as we go through this information today, with our limited time here, some of this information will go by pretty quickly. So I invite you, if you see something kind of go by and you're wondering, can you tell me more about that? Certainly drop questions or comments in the chat. I don't know if we have the Q&A feature on or not. If we do, you can use that too. But feel free to ask questions because we'll save some time after the 30-minute mark to have conversation and try and answer questions. But yeah, Tim, I'm thinking back to the 20 years when I was running my studio, right? Impossible Pictures. Everyone that knows me knows that story well. And I always felt like, I don't know, I'm just kind of making this up as I go. I don't know, we're doing well, but well relative to what? And so I think what I love about this moment is RevThink being able to offer owners some perspective, some notion of here's what is average, maybe here's what we find to be normal. Here's some things to watch out for, some red flags, and hopefully give some people some actual insights and takeaways of, based on the patterns we're seeing, what decisions should they be making?
Yeah, I almost regret not doing this sooner in the history of RevThink. I think it was one time where we had a RevThink retreat, and maybe it was Jason that brought it up, is how much information we pass between each other that we barely hand off to our clients. We know so much and have conversations. We actually study on behalf of people, ask big picture questions and dive in deep. And we don't often have the opportunity to give people that insight of what we're discovering. And so we had this, I think it was like just almost on a whim, we thought, well, let's just start this conversation. And the numbers on a year by year basis obviously have proven that people are curious and realize this is important. Hey, before we go too far, I do want to do one more piece of homework, or let's say like business. This is not being recorded. We don't want this to be recorded because there are things we're talking about that are kind of sensitive, and we recognize there are segments of your business, employees, clients, that if we talk about this, they might question what your thoughts are or hold you accountable for something. And we just want to have this open and transparent conversation. So we didn't want this to be passed on. There is one caveat. If you are a RevThink client and you have that locked space in Rev Community, we will post it in there and you will have access to this like you have access to all videos. So RevThink clients, there will be a replay here. And if those of you who are just watching this in replay, because a few of you reached out to me to say, hey, can you send me the link? Like I usually do, I'm doing that. But for the rest of you, we're not recording this and kind of just leaving it that sensitive stuff open and honest so that we can be transparent and not have that be passed around to people who might be taken more sensitive.
Yeah, it says it's being recorded, but it's not being shared. So for those of you that are saying, technically, I see the record button lit up there. So Tim, I'm going to share my screen and we'll kind of start diving into this. So what I want to mention is a little bit of context, right? Like you see, here's Tim, here's myself. What is it that we're about? Like, what's the big reason we're even here? I would say our mission is we're fueling this movement of creative business owners who know the best way to deal with the future is to create it. That's our mantra, right? That's our big idea that drives us. So Tim, why are we here? What's going to be the highest level like reason or takeaway maybe that people are going to get out of this?
Yeah, if you're going to create the future that you're intended when you start this business or you wake up every day to go to work, we have to have a target that we're trying to hit. So there are a series of decisions that you make on a day-by-day basis, week, quarter, and hour, or year by year, that we want you to synchronize into what those objectives and goals are for your business. Some of you might not be at the stage where you're asking those bigger questions. Other of you are in this fourth stage segment that we also reach out to, which is that maturing, thriving, kind of assets-driven business owner. But no matter what, we're always trying to hit this target. So we gathered together today just to give you this upfront perspective of what's possible in 2022 and some of the big questions that we're asking to give you that perspective and give you some of that drive.
So also some context here, like where is this data coming from? We call this behind the numbers. And first thing I'm going to mention is a little bit about RevThink, okay? So these numbers come from us aggregating a lot of information. For one, this movement that we're fostering is well over 200 creative firms. I haven't counted in a long time. Our team is made up of 7 coaches, advisors, consultants, and we're around the world. We've actually just started, brought on a consultant from Australia, Matt Taylor, who's joined us recently. And the source of this data comes out of these various ways that we engage with business owners like you, which is accelerators, masterminds, engagements, and of course, assessments. That's usually where it all starts. But Tim, I'll hand it over to you and you can tell people about the portfolio.
Yeah, sure. And hitting on that assessment idea, the assessment really gives us that insight into a company's finances when they start. And then as you work with us, we can check those assessments. So some of what we're looking at here in this portfolio analysis is the thought of what's the growth potential we're seeing with our clients that is capable of achieving being a business owner, and how do we collect that data and analyze it. So using that assessment and the other data we've collected over this entire portfolio, we're really looking at this last year, 63 different studios and production companies that we worked with RevThink. That total is about $189 million worth of revenue. So we're looking at a large body of data and revenue, and it's across many segments of this industry. You'll see that later in one of the graphs that we're showing. But we're in and out of a lot of products, and especially this tech industry, the NFT space. There's some really interesting movement that's happened this last year and different focuses of companies. So we like that. We think that's interesting, and we're going to hit that stuff. But just so you know, we do work with companies on a large range. We recognize that most business owners that are here and part of this conversation are in a $2 million to, let's say, $10 million range. What we decided in our data here today is companies we worked with that are less than $1 million and companies that we work with that are over 20 million, we've excluded them from this conversation. They seem to skew the number, and they skew in the numbers because they're dealing with a very different strategy and need. And that's what some of those one-on-one engagements or the master classes help us deal with, those people going through those early stages or those kind of more mature stages or seasons of your business. We've excluded those to not skew the conversation today. We do recognize there are other scenarios that would play out, but for the most part, that's where we're getting the numbers from and how we know what we know.
All right, so this is my prompt, Tim, when I say, can you bring up the Google Sheet and share your screen with us? And we'll give people a first peek at the kind of some of the raw metrics that we're tracking.
Yeah, so what we do is we compile data to run quarterly reports and annual reports with our clients, as well as look back at assessments that we've put into our database and look at overall growth for the industry. It's something that we're always interested. We have other metrics that are meaningful inside of RevThink, like bottom line numbers and certain employee ratios. And we're going to share a couple of those with you today. But for the most part, our data, it looks like this. We're looking at revenue numbers, employee numbers, things on a quarterly basis, things on an annual basis, and some of the other kind of big picture items. Last week, we focused on this number down here, which is this 5 makes 80 principle that we have. And I think, Joel, you're going to touch base with that in just a couple of minutes to talk about that. But also this wheel of fortune here. This area is one area that we're discovering is always moving and changing. We have general ideas of what each of these labels mean. But what's important to us is that if we're consistent with our labels, we can see movement take place. And I've really loved diving into this one this year because really what was, Joel, where you and I met was at ProMax, because this broadcast space was such an important role. It really was a cash cow for a lot of companies in this red broadcast space. You'd go to ProMax, you're dealing with broadcast promotions, network repackaging, and that kind of stuff. It was a major segment of the business. But clearly, and for very obvious reasons, this new streaming services or OTT platforms are kind of coming in and taking over that space in our business. Now, for the most part, what business have seen is growth. So they're not replacing broadcast with OTT. For example, I know a company I work with very closely that they've always done $2 to $3 million worth of broadcast work every year, and that hasn't changed. But those same clients, or at least same corporations, are calling them to add services to provide even more graphics and more services on the OTT platform. So that's one element that we're seeing growth. One thing that we've excluded this year that we've had in the past is the word live action. Live action was a segment that we saw before that was a type of service instead of a type of business that we had. And there really was a very strong, thriving live action community that was doing something. All of live action is still here. But what we've done is embedded in the type of clients that exist with, because last year changed some of those protocols and changed some of the services businesses got into. So really this brand work that we get into and the tech space are really other areas that are evolving and changing. And companies that would have told me 2 or 3 years ago that they were in the live action space are now telling me, and we're working with them on growth in brand, direct to brand, and the tech space. So these major areas are what's going on. The gaming area is one that we've put things into, and Em and I work closely together with NFT companies. And that's something we're looking at. And we've really put whatever NFT space we have over here in the gaming category, just so we know that there is something interactive that's coming, metaverse related, Web3, DGen, whatever word you want to use, there's something taking place in this digital space. And gaming was the place that seemed most appropriate for the type of work our NFT clients are going after. There are other NFT clients that we know are doing PFP projects and so on, but our clients are going after this gaming space. So that's where we put that category.
I'll add this comment. If you take a look at tech there, you see that 18%, and then you see brand right next to it, 19%. Mm-hmm. If we were looking back, say 5 years ago, we weren't tracking tech as an independent industry, as a segment, because it was just kind of lumped in with brand. But now it's come on so strong. Take a look at the combination of the two. So if you work brand direct, look at tech and brand, just those two is almost 40% of the industry, is where all those dollars are coming from. And similarly, gaming, Tim, 5 years ago was just not a big slice. So I think that's just interesting to note those shifts.
Yeah, this tech bubble that's coming in actually has some behavior patterns for our industry that's changing too. We talked about this earlier this year in one of our weekly briefings of how we're losing producers. The producer people seem to have disappeared throughout the COVID crisis. And I don't think they disappeared because of COVID. I think there are large things a large movement taking place. And one of them is that the tech companies are actually evolving into some of this space. They're absorbing the talent into their business, but still asking third parties, our clients, to do that work and provide services in addition to that. So because that became such a disruptor within our own operations and systems, especially in the production world, we started recognizing and start asking questions like, how valuable are these tech clients to us? How disruptive are they to the work that we're doing? And what things should we be doing differently, strategically with them that protects us, our company's growth, services them, but doesn't let them run us over?
Yeah, well said. Well, Tim, do you want to maybe, is there anything else you want to just scan there real quick? Because we're going to obviously drill down into a few specifics, but were there anything else there in that more raw data that you want to touch on at all, or should we skip into?
Yeah, I actually summarized. There's a couple of questions we asked last week. I'm not going to scan through this. I'll just summarize it this way. There's a couple of questions we asked last week that we can see in comparison of profit and revenue and whatever. Then I'm going to jump into a minute. So I've actually taken some of the rest of those graphs and combine them into a few pieces of logic so people can see that. So that's a better way of representing is what we did in the
Okay, cool. Well, let me share my screen, and I'll go to this first, call it takeaway. And this is a concept we talked about actually last week in the weekly briefing. We went into detail. I'm not going to go into detail here, but if you want to see that, the replay is available in our community. So if you're not a member there, we invite you to join and see that full detail. The big idea here is we notice a very common trend that, help me out here, Tim, so that basically most creative firms have 5 clients that represent 80% of all their revenue. And the big takeaway was simply this: let these go and focus on these. Because there was this interesting question, like we talked about, the bottom 10% of any creative firm's revenue gets a huge disproportionate amount of attention, because often owners have this addiction to cash, this thought of, I got to take everything I can get. And we asked the question, what if your company was just 10% smaller and you said goodbye to all those little ankle biters, as we called them? And that's like a strategy question of how could we put all that energy and go get another one of these 5? So there's some just interesting thoughts there. It's like a 80-20 rule, right, Tim?
It's actually almost an 80-20 principle as well. And it seems to follow that. But the majority of clients that we know can identify 5 major clients that they work with on an annual basis. Now, we did say that if you only have a few of them, you have guerrilla clients, which would be a major issue. Or if you spread this out too much, you really are servicing way too many clients. And as you said, Joel, that lack of focus really starts to commoditize you as a business, as a service-based business, but also as a creative company, which is what you want to distinguish yourself from.
Yep.
The other takeaway here is that if you don't focus on those 5, what are you giving up? And one thing that we've discovered is that last 20%, if it went away, it's actually not affecting your profit margin very much. So you can actually work 20% less and take home the same money. Your revenue would be less, but your profit would be higher because these 5 clients are better suited for you. So we call that that qualifying our clients so that the qualifications are ones that match us, our services, and people that respect us in the work that we're doing. They're not overlords, micromanagers, or really just using us to pawn off bad work. The worst thing that we do is lie to ourselves and we say, this one small project for $2,000 someday will be worth $2 million to my business. And I'm telling you right now, it's not true. It's never true. Don't believe it. Doesn't matter if it's ABC, Disney, Netflix, whatever. If they're asking you for $2,000 projects now, they're going to ask you for $2,000 projects tomorrow.
Yeah.
So say no soon and start getting into the work that you know you're capable of doing.
Yeah, you'll get to the end of the year and look back and say, why did we only do $2,000 size projects? And I would say, well, the answer is pretty clear.
Yeah,
all right, Tim.
So
if you have a question about this, of course, drop it in the chat or the Q&A. We'll try and come back to this. Tim, now this is a big one. Do you want to drive this? I can certainly click the screen through here, but I'll let you sort of talk us through this because this is really the heart of things.
Yeah, this is kind of the big picture. It's a great place to start with the kind of numbers we're looking at and probably what people are curious about. Yep. So the same body of people, the same representation we've had for the last 3 years are being represented here. So that same representation 2 years ago generated about $171 million worth of business. And last year, or I'm sorry, not last year, but 2020, the numbers were 161. So obvious hit. We know that was in Q2. We know that's COVID related, and we saw that. But in 2021, look at the growth that happened. We not only surpassed 2019, clearly surpassed 2020, but click the side there, Joel. The growth between that from year over year is a 14% growth in revenue on the same representation of clients. So really that segment that we're talking about has not changed. We're not adding more people into it. Those people experience more growth. And if I went back to 2018 and 2017, I would see even greater potential there because we've really been looking at a 5-year growth trajectory, but this last year has been really, really huge when it comes to revenue numbers.
If you don't mind me interjecting, take a look at 2019, everyone, and notice that 2021 exceeded, and not just a little bit, but like noticeably exceeded 2019. And 2019 was a hot year.
Yeah, by almost $20 million, Joel.
Yeah,
by almost 20 million. It's $18 million difference from 2019 to 2021. And that's spread out of a good body of people, but everyone now has different cash in their pocket than they're used to. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
If you go to the next piece there, you're going to see how this plays out as profit. So this might or might not be a surprise to you, but in the same segment, 2019, people were making 5% profit on the 171 million. Clearly the COVID year, we know what happened there. And I'm going to explain this in a second when we get to employee costs. But that year to give us a hit. And a lot of the PPP funding and financing was put in there because we were given money to keep our businesses going, even though they were not profitable. But this last year in 2021, that money, as we thought, as a stimulus, came back to us. And we now really saw 7% profit. So 2%. And keep in mind, that's 2% on 20 million more in revenue. So what we pocketed isn't just the revenue growth, but also that percentage growth. Now, the skew is here, and we should be honest, the skew is here that a good portion of the people that we're showing here are our clients, and our clients are using systems and methods that we put into place to control those costs. So we know that we have an economy of scale. We bake that into the projects based on what we call the splits, and we're holding on to that stuff, and we're allowing for economy of scale to take place. So this is our clients' growth for sure that's skewing that number up. But I also believe that many of us are seeing this kind of growth year or segment for segment because new people that come to us and we do their assessment, we're seeing this potential in their numbers as well.
Yeah, this is kind of, we need that little fine print that says what results not typical, right? Because this represents a certain portfolio, and these people are all managing production, they're managing costs, they're baking in their profits and so forth. So they're getting results that are somewhat exceptional. But
that's what that bulletproofing profits masterclass that we do. That's the exercise that's available there.
Yep. So what next?
Share that. Hit next. So here's the next initiative. It's staff costs. So if we stack the staff costs into the same grid here, we see this. That in 2019, staff costs were 38%. Last year, clearly, as we said, we held on to our staff, even though we didn't have work. That's what PPP funding did. And so we had a major growth there. So that's an outlier year. But come back to this year, and we have a growth of staff costs by 11%. So that same body represented people are holding on to staff people. What we know is that they've invested in staff people. And it's a pretty interesting thing because look at this, Joel. The 7% growth on profit is 50% of the 14% we see above, which of extra revenue. So we know what's happening is that 49% number, as the companies got that, they actually shared it right back out to their employees at a higher rate than they've done before, which last year was a really amazing year to do that. We've talked about that with staffing issues, resource issues, some of the great reset that people are going through. There was a major investment back into investing in your employees, not necessarily freelancers, and holding on to people, retaining them, and paying them more money. So most likely, if you're a business owner, someone has asked you for a higher increase, and in the production space, probably asked you for a greater increase than you ever imagined, because the producers really have asked for a larger gain in this last year. And that gain is being seen right here in this number. But here's the thing, you also make more profit. So you gave more to your employees and you made more profit by doing that. That's a pretty awesome return and win-win for you and your employees. But this can be an issue in the future. When it comes time for cutbacks, employees are not as flexible as freelancers. And that when people get used to a certain revenue number or income, a household income, it's hard for them to take a hit. So there's going to need some strategic planning in the future as inflation slows down. But now we know inflation is going to be about 6% in the next year. But as inflation slows down in the near future, those numbers should be considered, and you should have understanding and policy in place to deal with that when it comes proactively. We want to be proactive on all this.
So I want to make sure everyone heard something you said back there that went by pretty quickly, because I could look at this and say, yeah, my profit was 7%, but I gave it all away to my staff, and that's not accurate.
That's not accurate. What happened is the clients gave you more money, or you've received more money for the same work also, and you've shared those gains with your staff. But really, specifically, those are strong investments you're making. This 49% mark is not horrible. I'm going to show you a number in a couple of slides that I want to help correct this and give you an easy way to earmark it. But it's not a horrible number during a growth year. What has to happen is the reconciliation of other costs that you have to control to meet those needs, or specifically going back to the previous idea, qualifying those clients sooner, asking for more revenue from them, and see if you can't create revenue gain to correct that number to 38% instead of cutting back on costs. It's going to be harder for you to cut back on costs. So it's the type of services you ask for, the rates you ask for those services, the position you have with those clients are going to allow you to correct this over time. And you do have a year or two to correct this, maybe even 3 years to correct this. So you can position yourself and start working yourself into a relationship so that when the time comes, you're in a solid position when it needs to be corrected.
Okay, I'm going to tap the next one. You ready?
Yeah, this one's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because an outsourced number, if you go to one, just click it, it's actually going to replace some of the information there. Because here's one thing that we've learned with our factor system and the roll-up, we call it CREOS, the operating system behind a lot of our clients, is we've locked in this outsourced costs. We do this thing called the splits and the distribution and control over outsourced costs. What's really great about this is this number is not controlled by the business owner, it's controlled by their producer. When we distribute money correctly on a project and we work with our producers, they don't overspend. And we lock in those numbers, and you can see no matter what the trend is, 19, 20, or 21, we're hitting the same number every time. Why? Because we have disciplined production practices that allow us to do that. So mastering that production element and knowing how to control those production costs really allow you for a lot of security. And what I like to say is this is those tight wheels in your vehicle so you can make those sharp corners. That number right there will respond to you. I'm proving it right there. It's responding to whatever mechanism we put in place, no matter what the year looks like. So that's a really great tool to have in place. And again, if I went back 2 more years, you're going to see very consistent numbers across the board. I'm always happy when I do my annual report with my clients and we look at this number. I swear they always say, let's go back to the factors report from last January and see what the number was. And we nearly hit it, exact percentage every time, which really means we can make our own future. We decided it 12 months in advance, and 12 months later, we hit it exactly the way we wanted to. We can make that be any number we wanted to and still achieve our goals.
So Tim, we can dispel a myth here, I think, right? Because there's this myth that the Great Resignation, the tight labor market, the talent crunch, as we've called it, like that is real. However, for the owners that are saying, oh my gosh, it's just costing me so much more money, the numbers don't really match that. And that was actually a total surprise to me. I didn't think that these controls that we had in place would really show up this consistently. I was taken aback.
Yeah, because in our system, it's not invisible. We've turned those numbers inside out and we look at them. We call them decisions, right? So yes. We want to say, hey, this is 189 million decisions we've helped our clients make in the last 12 months. That's a lot of decisions we helped our clients make. So in that 189 million decisions, we have to have some visibility of how is this machine that we're building responding to our demands, and can we keep up with it? And are we doing things correctly? And when you get to a certain scale, you have to be doing it through a process and a method more than just finite numbers on each bid that you're doing. Yeah, and then hoping with all your might that you actually hit it. You can actually put that out in front of you and hit those targets. We work in a very subjective economy. Clients love what they're doing. They already hired you to get those results. All you have to do is act them out at your specifications and their desire, and you can make yourself profitable year over year.
So if I'm putting on my old owner hat, would it be fair for me to say, oh, I see, Tim, I paid a lot more for outsourced, but I also made a lot more because the percentage is basically the same?
It's basically the same. It's actually, we say up front, we want our outsourced costs to be, and we'll say, these numbers are 17%. Right. And we tell our producers, don't spend over 17%, and our producers don't spend over 17%. And therefore they're always making that percentage. And we work off of percentage, not whole dollars. That way it does have that accordion effect. If it's smaller, still 17%, if it's gross, 17%. Yeah. And therefore you can keep up with the demand. Staff doesn't allow you to do it that same way. So we work with a different mechanism for staff.
All right, so I'm just going to check in with everybody. We're at the half hour, 34-minute mark, actually. So bear with us. We're going to try and get through the rest of this promptly so we can get to some questions, discussion. If you'd have a question, Shauna, yes, I saw your question. Thank you. I'll answer it later. Feel free to drop your question in there. So Tim, let's move on to our third big slide here. So we have some interesting takeaways, and we're going to right now, for the moment, look at what we'll call a representative creative firm that's generating $3 million a year. This, will apply to a certain extent if you're bigger or smaller in terms of revenue than that. But what did we observe in terms of team?
Yeah. So again, what we're trying to do is just create a case study of what these principles would look like on a $3 million business, so you can see it. But you can learn about your company through some of the metrics that we're talking about here. Yep. So team size. Actually, these $3 million business on average has about 16 employees. What's interesting is that those 16 employees really used to be 14. They increased by a number of 2. So each company added 2 more people than they would have had 2 years prior in 2018, which puts the revenue per staff ratio at 187. Actually $0.5,000. So $187,000 in revenue for every staff member that they've hired. That's an interesting number to us, because if you've ever been around and we have those ratios, you know that our target, RevThink target, is between 200 and 300,000. Yep. So we're just south of what our number is. Our key number is of 200,000, being low at 187. So there's a stretch there. We saw that in the previous numbers. But what we're recognizing is the need right now to kind of allow the staff to settle, because there was so much shifting and buying and poaching and moving and running away and all that kind of stuff, that security makes a lot of sense this year. So even have that near $200,000 is really great. And again, we've locked in 2 more employees that they're at our disposal as we need to. And a $3 million business, 16 employees, it's a very safe place to be.
Yeah, my gut's telling me that there's a lot of people that were seizing opportunity and they made that stretch goal. They sort of took that leap up to that next level and maybe bit off a little bit more in terms of permanent staff size than they actually need. And now there's this season of hopefully you've planted those seeds, you've made those investments, and over the next year, you're going to start seeing a return as that revenue per staff gets over hopefully that 200K or closer to that 250 average that we look for.
Yeah, and in a year that you have 14% revenue growth and people moving so fast, there's a lot of effort going into just finding somebody, and finding them on a project by project basis is not very easy. So in a year of revenue growth, you know that you have some security. Yeah, lock in 2 more people, especially some of your more key decision makers. Lock them in sooner, retain them. And this next couple of years during this inflation and potential growth, there is a way of leveraging them and getting your money back. As we'll say, like, we can put the splits in place and cover their costs every time. So they pay for themselves very easily. And we can put that discipline in place as we respond to these market trends.
So in terms of those people that we're adding, we noticed some interesting trends as well. The top hires, okay, here we go. Producers, salespeople, and creative, but in that order. And Tim, this was a big surprise for me because creative is always the default, right? Maybe half of our employees are creative. These are animators and designers, art directors, things like that. But this year, everyone wanted a producer. Oh my gosh, how many calls, inquiries did you get? Hey, if you know any producers out there? And I'm like, good luck, because everybody wants one right now. And then the other one was sales. Since when have we ever seen everybody put so much focus on getting a salesperson and adding them? That was, I guess I knew anecdotally I felt it, but when we actually looked at the numbers, I thought that's super interesting.
Yeah. The top mark, producer taking the top mark this year is such a key indicator of what 2021 really felt like, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And to have that producer role be such a key, important role that people are willing to go seek them out, because I think for the most part, producers have been freelancers and they came and went, but to say, no, we can't do it anymore. I have 2 on staff. I need to grab a 3rd and lock them in because I need these producers. They're some of my key decision makers. The sales slot, what's interesting is most people, when you sit down with them, they plan, they say, I'm going to hire a creative director this year, or I'm going to hire an art director to take over and help me. But the follow through on creative is not as often. One person they always hire is sales. So we know the sales and creative are the common words. Production is the offshoot. So this is a great indicator of what happened in 2021 and how the world has kind of shifted, and obviously why some of the higher rates on producers took place this side. They were more sought out than anyone else. So yeah, very key metrics there that show us looking back at the year. Moving in the year forward, what we're trying to tell people, and we did this with the producer masterclass at the end of the year, is like, you can actually make a producer. As salespeople, they're kind of hard to come by because they're a certain type of personality that want to do sales. Creative people, you're the creative person most likely, and you have to find someone that's closer fit. But producers have a skill that they can execute. And some of the reason why we're not distributing this is I don't want producers to hear me talk about like they're just a skilled laborer. They're not just a skilled laborer. We know that there are amazing producers, and there's some that need a lot of work. But for the most part, there is a skilled process that you can learn, systems, methods, and routines you can put in place, and you can train people to step into this producer slot. So given enough time, you can actually bring on producers and move them up the ranks to be more and more successful. And we took on that challenge last year. It became such a high need that we created the producer masterclass in the fall. It was very well attended, and clearly people are still asking it for a relaunch. So I think we're going to run 2 master classes on top of each other in the next month or so, because the producer masterclass is such a high need.
Well, with that in mind, I want to encourage anyone that has a question about this. I'm seeing a couple come into the Q&A, so we'll get to those questions here in just a minute. And Tim, let's give people a peek ahead, because if you're wondering, okay, this is kind of new to me, but I'd love to learn more, I want to go deeper in this, we just want to give you a quick peek at some of the things that are going to be happening inside our community, okay, as this quarter unfolds. I'm going to be running my next Jumpstart, which is really for these emerging smaller firms that are, say, at around $1 million or below. And then Tim, there's another producer masterclass. We're going to help another batch of owners and their producers level up.
Yeah, producer masterclass. We're also launching the sales keeping class because very similar to producer masterclass, we realize now we have systems, methods, and routines that we can implement and teach others to grow their sales team. So we're going to do that stuff. And then finally, bulletproofing profits. This is really going into the factors method, the splits, our CreOS system, those things that help us control those costs. And this is complements. The reason we're doing producer masterclass first and bulletproofing profits second is it's good to have the right people in place to teach them how to bulletproof profits, because the two go hand in hand. There's control mechanisms for production that you do in bulletproofing profits. So those go hand in hand. We should also just say, like, very clearly, the reason we're here is because we want to engage you. There are many of you that we've never met. They probably never sat on a phone call with either Joel, me, or any of our team. And we've missed you and you've missed us. So we want to understand where you are, what's going on, how these members might resonate with you, and then what strategies or tools do we have that are already in place. So we created a landing page just for this webinar called RevThink.com/now. And that's really just a very quick onboarding tool. And then you can schedule time with one of our success managers, and they'll find a time. We'll look through the assessment with you. We'll analyze it. Joel and I are actively part of this process, but schedule a time to understand what we have and what tools might be a good fit for you, and see if we can't plug you in. At least I know Rev Community is going to be a great place for everyone. Yeah. But see if one of these upcoming master classes that we have going on, or even we have workshops and masterminds that are more community based. And we don't want to miss you. We're doing this so that you can gain hold of this business you have and you can thrive like the others that we're working with. So please join us at RevThink.com/now. Get to know us and let's see how we can help each other.
Beautiful. Okay, so skipped ahead to the wrong slide. So let's shift now. We're at 5:43 here in the Central Time Zone. We do have a couple questions. First of all, Shauna, yes, this came from Ohana in Steamboat Springs. So get out there and get your own. My favorite. Yeah, right. My favorite clothing shop in Steamboat. So here's a good question for you, Tim. I'm seeing, looking at a company, and let me stop the share here. Yeah. Looking at a company that has 16 employees, how would those roles be distributed inside the company usually?
Yeah, sure. So we call it 3 legs of the stool, right? So creative, production, and sales. So those 3 have to be covered. If you're a $3 million business, you've already gone past that $1 million mark, and you've put in those 3 legs so that you have those 3 ingredients functioning within your business. What we found last year is basically adding security, as we said, to the production tool. So often you might have one good solid EP and a bunch of freelancers, or an EP and that does sales, and a really good production head of production is the title I often use, which is the person who helps you break down projects, do the bids and what have you. But that producer role is somebody that you would always onboard as needed, because those 2 other roles can handle it. And this last year, boom, you hired a producer. You locked in that role. No more chasing them around. It's way too important. The projects are flying through. We're taking on more clients and more revenue we did before. We can't handle that. So that's a big part of it. On the creative side, it's often stacked. The business owner or creative director on their side, often an art director that helps implement the designs on the project side. So that's someone that's overseeing the project creative as it goes on. And then clearly animators and designers and specialists as you need to execute. And then 1 or 2 people dedicated to sales.
Yeah, I would maybe, Mike, if I was going to do a feels like and generalize, I'm thinking around that size, roughly 2/3 of that 16 team members are going to be artists and creatives and so forth, right? Because you probably have a couple partners, and then you have people that are on the operations, sales, finance side, several people. Then you have several producers, and of course they are that interface between the outside world, the clients, and the inside of the company. And it's also, if this is helpful too, I would say it's not uncommon that we see companies that at any one time there might be an almost equivalent number of freelance external talent that's working with you as well. So if you have 8 full-time staff, you might at any given time have up to 8 freelancers that you're working with, and that's not uncommon. Wouldn't say that it's unhealthy because everyone immediately thinks, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. But the reality is you gain a lot because they're not a full-time expense that you have to manage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned it, Joel. And the reason why I chose the $3 million number instead of just going beyond that or lower than that is the 3 million is right at that threshold in the seasons of a creative firm where you have to add the two ingredients, finance and operations together, or finance and marketing together. Sorry, and that tip over changes a lot of behavior right around that $3 million mark. So I try to, when I did that capture, I got there right where it'd just be regular production, three legs of the stool. That's what I did there. But there is one more growth potential, and maybe you're experiencing a little bit where you might have a finance person in place, or at least discussing that, and then a marketing that goes beyond sales. So those two ingredients are added together. It's a very hard for business owners to get past that. They often hit that glass ceiling and don't know why. It's because you have to master two ingredients at the same time, and you're usually used to just bringing one on at a time. So I chose that threshold.
So another question I got DM'd here behind the scenes: internal versus external sales person, right? Like are people going out and hiring more reps, right? And I'm like, I don't know that that's the question we necessarily want to answer. I think the more interesting question is, what are the pros and cons of internal sales versus external sales?
Yeah, I'm just going to speak my bias. Always do internal sales. You have to. So often the reason we do external sales is we've given up on the idea that we understand and know how to master sales. So we say, I'm not an expert in sales. I'm going to bring on somebody that's an expert. They're going to come in and they're going to do all the work for me. The reality is nobody's going to do all the work for you no matter what. There are systems, methods, and routines that you put in place to achieve those goals. So as a business owner, you have to master the sales ingredient. It's the one thing that's holding you back from hitting that thriving creative firm.
Yeah.
So we want people to say, please bring on an internal salesperson and then learn what it's like to do sales methods and routines. We have software we use. We love Pipedrive. It's one of our favorite tools. It's one of the first things I put in place. And there isn't one company I've put in place with expert long-term salespeople that say, wow, I didn't realize this was there, right? I didn't realize how this worked. But also things like, did we just talk about the opportunity matrix recently and the bingo card? There are very specific sales tools that you can master and give to an internal salesperson and help them be successful. So that's my bias. I'm okay with reps. I get why they need to be there. And if you're a small business, if you're $1 million or under 2 million, and that's a stopgap for a while, that's great. But I have a lot of questions about how to negotiate those deals to make sure that they work the way you want them to.
Well, I'm looking at this comment from Ricardo. What's up, mister? He's saying, I've never hired an external rep, but I've always kind of wanted to try it. And I think that's actually a healthy response, right? It's that thing that can be useful to augment an existing strong internal sales capability. So if I said, hey, I want to go after automotive, or hey, I want to go develop the Southeast USA and do a lot of development in Atlanta. Okay, sure. If a rep can augment your already strong, I'm fine with that. But that idea of I'm just going to abdicate the sales responsibility to somebody else, right? They're just going to do it for me. Man, that usually it just comes back to bite you in some very unfortunate ways.
Yeah, if I've mastered the sales ingredient, I can bring on reps all day long because I know what I want that rep to do. And I think reps are surprised when I start working with a company and them, how knowledgeable I am and how direct I am of what they want to accomplish. Because they've walked around going, it's all about relationships. And I say like, no, listen, I want you to follow this process. And they become successful. Reps become successful in this method, but I know what I want them to do. I don't, as you say, abdicate to them.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, that classic line that the reps say about it's all about relationships and I have all these connections. In my experience, I know I'm being tough here, but in my experience, that's a myth. It's just, there's the thing called LinkedIn. There's a thing called Google. It's like those days are over, and you as the owner can step in. I give you permission to step into that role, and those are your connections. Own them, build those relationships, and seize those opportunities.
Yeah, and take Joel's jumpstart. He'll show you how to position yourself so you're confident to make your own relationship just as easy as somebody else that's been around for years. You can have the conversation yourself.
So another question here, bulletproofing profits. That sounds like impossible. What does that mean? Like, we don't, right? It's that idea. I'm guessing behind this question here, the person, what they're really saying is, well, I don't really have control over profits, right? Because my clients won't let me, right, do things that way, or I can't say no. Like, so give us a sense of what does bulletproofing profits mean?
It's one of my favorite moments as a Timism when we were talking to a president of a large conference, and we were working with them on some protocols that we want to teach to business owners. And I pitched this idea of bulletproofing profits, and they said, you can't call it bulletproofing profits. When I said, well, why can't I call it bulletproof profits? They said, because you can't guarantee that. And I said, well, of course I can. Spend less than you make, and you make profit. So what we do is put in systems and routines in place so that the money you spend is less than the money you receive, and you have profit. So that's what we're teaching. We're teaching you where your money goes, how to allocate that money correctly, so you're achieving what your clients' needs are, but also achieving your corporate needs and locking in guaranteed profit.
Yeah.
So that's what we do when we do that thing. And we use this whole idea of an ice cube tray of how one thing flows to the other. And it's really the lack of prioritization of the money as it flows to your company is what's causing the biggest issues. If you prioritize it correctly, you pay first things first and allow for the subjective nature of the projects to have the right attention within the scope the client gave you, not what you want to do for the client, but the client gave you a scope, a budget. You stay within their scope, you'll make profit every time.
Well, I'm kind of getting triggered from my old days running my company when I did not do that. Thank you very much. But I would also say that this journey that I love to see owners go through of taking their businesses from this order taker posture, right? This pick me posture to becoming the expert is a really beautiful transition where you're not just reacting and responding to your client barking out orders and then trying somehow to end up with money at the end. There's a really different way to engage where you're creating value, you're appreciated, you're respected, and you're leading that engagement. So you do have the power to make choices in that engagement. And
and I'll say, challenge us, join Rev Community, jump on there, get on the general message board and say, hey guys, is Tim full of shit? Can he actually bulletproof profits? And have our clients tell you the process they walked through and if we did or didn't. I mean, they'll tell you, we have honest people inside there, and we'll see if it makes it or not. We'll make
So I just got a really interesting question from Matt here. He just jumped into the main group. He says, I'm a freelancer working regularly, but I want to build a business rather than just hanging a shingle. What are the first steps to making that transition? Wow. Where would we begin, right? Tim, do we have a simple thought for Matt here that could get him going in a good direction?
Yeah, it kind of goes outside the scope of what RevThink traditionally does. I have this thing called the 4 stages of a creative career. And Matt, it sounds like you're going through those transitions from the artist stage to what I call the auteur stage. And that transition is a very important transition to understand what you're actually trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it. But I say we get in this business for one of 3 reasons: fame, fortune, and freedom. Those are the priorities we often have when we understand success within the creative business. But what you really have to understand is influence and how it works, not just through this first transition, but transition into stage 3 and stage 4 of your business, and how influence grows and how you use influence to get there. So one of the things you have to want to do and accomplish is this big picture idea of not just find independence, freedom, make more money, fortune, or become richly famous from all the work that you've done and getting all these awards, but you have to want to live out this career, the entire career, all the years of it, and leverage one act to the other to accomplish that goal. So with that in mind, yeah, there are easy steps once you get into recognizing that's what you want to do, of what it takes to win clients, hire people, get things started. And if you're getting started, you need to put the first 2 legs of the stool in place. You have to understand what you're getting into, what you're leveraging to your clients that has value, not commodity, value, and how you're going to get those successfully out of house over and over again, which is production. So master those 2 first. Understand that, find a partner, hire people, start to understand, read books, get on our website. All those things are in place, but those 2 need to be in place. When it comes to that third one, sales, you can jump into Joel's masterclass when you're ready to do that.
Yeah, my two quick things would be swing for the fences, right? Like go pitch something big, go win a big freaking project, something bigger than you ever thought you might go for. And then number two, don't charge by the hour. Charge by the project, charge for outputs, do not charge for inputs. Okay, I've got one more question here because we've got about 4 minutes left, and it's this hot button of producers. Okay, the question is how, if I can't find a producer because everyone's busy or taken, how do I make my own?
Yeah, so one, take the producer masterclass, because we're going to break down what it takes to develop that into place. Production really is a system. It's an overall method. It's a production method. It's a series of systems that get you to decision points, and then visualizing those decision points so that you can make them over and over again. So the visualizing, so knowing where to start and how to break down a project so you can build those elements in place. But importantly, visualizing those decisions, getting them out on paper. So a very easy tool is like a budget. It visualizes, gets a sense of where the money's going to go and how long and how much we're going to pay for certain line items. But production has a series of those events that are taking place throughout its life, the production's lifestyle. And a person can learn that system. They really, really can. So some people can handle a lot of projects. Some people can only handle a few projects, but everyone can learn that process and that method. So visualizing those decisions so that you can follow that path. And then there's collaboration, exploration, and understanding that needs to be part of that. So that's what we often put in place when we're training a team to bring on a producer, or training producers, or in our masterclass, training anyone that wants to show up, of what that method is like and how to master it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that understanding producing as a method has really been interesting because, right, in RevThink, we have what we call these 7 ingredients. And it's what are all of the areas that you have to master, right, to really be successful, to thrive, to get where you want to go. And it's things like sales and marketing and operations and finance and so forth. But that production ingredient, like all the other ingredients, it has a method. And it's funny, Tim, like it's been a really interesting discovery for us over the years of just learning and absorbing and trying and experimenting to verify, yeah, there's a method. And a method is what? Systems and routines. And once you find the person that has the right aptitude for those, they can be made. I know that's not a polite term to like make a person, yeah. But I think it really is possible. And I think also we noticed when we ran the masterclass a few months ago that we had a lot of seasoned producers who were part of that process, and they were there with their boss, the owner, and they were both saying, oh, right, I kind of always knew you did that, but I didn't understand what was behind that, or the thinking, or some producers who said, I never thought of it that way. That's what I do maybe intuitively, but now you've given me a language and an actual system so that we can, now I can teach this to my colleague, the coordinator, and grow her up to be a producer.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking with producers that have been producing for over 10 years, maybe even 15 years in some cases. And they were recognizing they understood things, but didn't know how to pass that on or grow somebody or give that knowledge to them, like break down the elements and make that happen. But also the reason why it's coming up is that too long, for probably a decade, we've been able to focus on who instead of how when it comes to a producer. Yeah. And now we have to realize that who doesn't exist. So how is now the question. But honestly, like the environment kind of has taught certain traits, some of them very poor, which is why we correct things and do things like our CreOS system is to put the right things in place so we can see those decision points. But really the ability to grow your business this is one of the areas you can easily master and train other people.
We got a few other questions that kind of came in here last minute. So for those of you that have to go because it's top of the hour, thank you for joining us. We'll try and get these last 3 questions in here real quick. I think yes, Emmett did just drop that link. So if anyone wants to schedule a call with our team and do that discovery process, just go to revthink.com/now. Okay, Tim, question. Are there any general numbers that speak to budgets of individual projects? I know there are so many variables that will affect this per industry, per client, et cetera. but anything generally to give us an idea of how much we're charging as an industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables, and I'm very careful not to share rates in general because people so desperately want a rate. They're like, Kim, can you just tell me what the rate is for a creative director? I can put in my budget, and then I will be chosen, through the golden series of process for this agency or whatever. And it's just not true. It's not. There's a makeup of what you're trying to accomplish and how that breakdown works. There are some market rates that are out there, but honestly, you know them. If you're hiring a freelancer, you know the market rate. It's as obvious as anything else. So the question is when you're putting a budget together, how do I stack up all that's visible to my client and not visible to my client, so I can cover costs and make the splits that I want to make. And there's a lot of things that often we don't charge for, or we're too literal in the discussion. So we're saying, well, how could I ever make any money? Someone's charging me $500, so I charge my client $550. There isn't any margin in that. And we're like, yeah, there's no margin in that. So you have to discover the value you're giving that client and knowing how to pitch and budget for the value, as Joel said, not the commodity, the day by day a part of it. So that is a kind of a maturing process. And again, I think that's probably what we're discovering. I know we're going to discuss that in sales keeping, of how to put that value proposition in front of people and how that really, really works, and the positioning of your business in that conversation, so that you can have that conversation directly and get the dollars you deserve.
Yeah, I don't have hard data on this, but I know anecdotally, I can certainly say this, that in that tech segment, okay, so the Facebooks and the Googles and so forth of the worlds, those budgets definitely increasing compared to what we saw several years ago, like noticeably increasing. And there's always been this, I think, myth out there in the industry that, well, every year budgets go down and the clients want more. Woe is me, woe is me. And I would say that myth continues to be a myth. That 20 years ago, when we were doing projects that were $100,000 and everybody was complaining about there aren't any $100,000 projects anymore, I was able to go get $200,000 projects. It's all about, what is your genius? Are you focusing on it? Are you positioned and helping the marketplace see that, be curious about it, engage with you as an expert right from the start? Because for the people that have a true, genuine expertise, Tim, isn't it your experience? It's amazing. I mean, sometimes it's nuts what some clients are paying for the experts that are narrowly positioned in that area of expertise.
I was going to say that, like, I work with clients, they have a team of 4 and they do $500,000 projects and up. And so it's clearly can't be. Do you know how many hours 4 people would have to put in to make $500,000 if you counted their cost rate against that? It's impossible. There's not enough hours in a year. Yeah. So what are they doing differently? And how do you explain that, what that value is to the client, so you're capturing that part of the value? So if you want to, you can probably Google our value pyramid and see how commodities, services, strategy, and vision stack together, so that when you're selling high up the value pyramid, you're getting greater results for your thinking than you are for your effort, which is on the lower end of that.
Sure.
But we often mature through that value pyramid. It's hard to register what's coming up unless you've seen it or listened to somebody process that before in front of or with you.
Yes. All right. I do see some people dropping off saying thank you. And of course, you're welcome. So there's a question here from David Finnegan. What's up, David? About any info on team numbers for emerging versus thriving businesses. I would actually say, David, ask that in the community, because I know you're in there, because I think there's several ways to answer it, and it's not going to be easy to answer it in a short term. Jan from Think Mojo, what's up, Jan? I see you. Had also asked any numbers on salaries, right? And I'm thinking the question here, Tim, is increasing, decreasing? And my first thought is, well, we definitely saw producer salaries go up this past year.
Absolutely. Producers are going up. I'm going to guess that creatives are going to follow in the near future. And really, I have a feeling what's going to happen as the mother of invention often takes place, or mother of innovation takes place. Like we start have to do things and deliver things differently than we've done before. But what's cool is that we point at the beginning of the webinar, our clients are asking us to do different things. Like broadcast is now asking us to deliver OTT things. Why aren't we having a different conversation about that? The tech industry that used to be direct to brand are now asking us for different types of services. Why are we giving into commoditizing our services? Why aren't we talking about satisfying their needs without them trying to capture it all in-house? Those are all great conversations. And those are people are doing $500,000 projects with tech companies, not $5,000 projects, trying to make a bunch of stickers.
Well, I'm thinking of Emmett here, right? There's this space in the community that we've set up just for the NFT discussion, right? Like, don't think of it as a service. How can you be the expert and go to your client and lead them on an NFT strategy? That's where the opportunity is, not, oh yeah, we can make your piece of art that you're going to then go and mint.
Yeah. And you make 13 million and we make 300,000. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Tim, this sure has been fun. I'm really grateful for everyone that stayed here, especially hung out for the hour listening to you and I yammer on and on and on. Thank you for all the kind feedback from everybody. For those of you that are not members of our community, if you go to revthink.com, I think /community, you'll see the process there. You can apply for membership. If you're a business owner, we welcome you to go through that process. And for the rest of you, if you want to get to know us, if you haven't met us before, go to revthink.com/now. Did I get it right, Tim? I hope so. I think Tim might be frozen. In any event.
Right, Joel.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Emmett. Thank you, Emmett, Jason, Connor, our team behind the scenes. As always, we love you all, you creative entrepreneurs out there. We exist so that you can thrive in your business and in your life and in your career. So we'll see you around the community, or we'll see you next week for next week's regularly scheduled weekly briefing, 5 p.m. Eastern. Until then, thanks, everyone.